those aren't exactly skills. They're really kind of general topics that contain lots of smaller sub-skills.
Right.
So it's really hard to practice being a good golfer. It's way easier to practice hitting off of the tee with a driver, right? So you take the global skill and you break it up into much smaller parts. And if you're clear about what you want, it becomes very easy to find what are those sub-skills, what are the smaller parts that are actually going to help you get to that target performance level as quickly as possible.
So like if there are 100 sub-skills, if you've done number one, it makes it much easier to figure out, okay, what are the 15 of those sub-skills that are going to give me 80% of the results towards getting where I want to go.
And what you often find is it's only maybe 2 or 3 sub-skills that you use most of the time.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's just, breaking it, actually step 3, right? You go out into the world and you find sources of information that help you do this deconstruction. If you look at, say for example, pick up 5 books on whatever it is that you're trying to learn how to do. Don't read them cover to cover, skim all of them, one right after the other.
Right.
And what you'll see is the 2 or 3 sub-skills that you're going to use most of the time are the ones that come up over and over again, right? So you just practice those first. And if you spend your time practicing those things and avoid a lot of the distractions or things that aren't going to help you, you say, okay, as you're practicing.
So that's a big question, so I'll ask you now. If out of a whole basket of potential sub-skills that add up to the thing that you want to accomplish, only a small handful are very often really, really critical, why are we taught to do them all at once?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, actually. I think the biggest thing is we treat, in our culture now, learning as a very academic exercise. Like the objective is to suck in a ton of information about this thing, whether or not you're going to use it. And I think, education in our culture now has been seen in the academic sense and less in the sense of practicing something with the eye of using it to do some particular cool thing.
So it's less applied.
Yeah. So, the whole idea of researching the topic, and something that I had to train myself out of, is I love doing research, right? So the first thing, like programming was a good example of this for me. It's like, I want to learn how to program. I get 10 books, I have these courses, I'm going to go through all of this stuff, and then I'm going to sit down and write a program. It's like, no. You use the research, do just enough research to help you do the deconstruction and find the most important sub-skills first, and then get out of research mode and into practice mode as quickly as you can.
That's where the real stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. And when you start practicing what it is you're actually trying to do, that's when you see the performance improvement.
Now, you also made a differentiation when we started the conversation between cognitive skills, like learning a language, and playing golf. Do all of these steps, I mean, we still have 2 more to work through, but with the 3 that we've covered so far, are they all sort of equally relevant to both types of learning?
Yeah, so for both types of learning, you have to go through the same general process. Some of the actual practice techniques can be different. So for example, one of the things that you can do when you're practicing a motor skill, which works really well, is practice it within a couple hours of going to sleep, either taking a nap or going to bed for the night. There's a lot of research around the idea of what's called consolidation. So your brain translates the practice and experience you had and encodes neural connections to help you do it better.
Right.
That practice or that process is way more efficient if you practice within about 4 hours of going to sleep. So in the process of writing the first 20 hours, I retaught myself how to touch type on a different keyboard, which is like having the experience of rewiring my brain to do something differently.
Right.
And then fun things like playing the ukulele, which is all motor skills, and it's surreal experience. I would practice it right before I would go to bed, and the first couple hours of practice was just terrible.
Right.
So I would practice, I'd go to bed, I'd pick it up first thing in the morning just to see. It was like astounding how much better I was after a couple hours sleep.
That's amazing.
Because sleep helps consolidate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
So yeah, some of the actual practice techniques are different, but the general process is the same.
Right. So that's pretty remarkable. You literally wake up in the morning and you're better than you were when you went to sleep just because you slept in the middle of it.
Absolutely. So yeah, so for
like noticeably better, like
noticeably better. Like one of the in the process of learning typing, like once I switched keyboard format, I went from typing about as fast as I could think to literally like getting up in the morning and trying to use my computer. Like the first couple of days I was doing it, was like, oh my gosh, I can actually like type now. I can do something.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that type of thing works for a motor skill. For cognitive skills, memorization techniques like spaced repetition and reinforcement, like flashcards with feedback helping you remember things works really well. So yeah, the actual practice techniques can be very different, but the core method of learning is very much the same.
And again, for both of them, before you go to bed,
yes,
helps with consolidation.
Absolutely.
What about simulated practice?
Simulated practice can be effective as long as it is as close to real-world performance as you can make it.
Right.
So a lot of the trying to memorize something and then having that translate directly into practice doesn't really work.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking more in terms of motor skills.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was a gymnast when I was a kid, we would before any event, I would basically, before I would step up to a piece of apparatus, I would kind of close my eyes and I would actually envision my body like moving through the entire thing.
Okay.
And then there was all this research that said that it triggers all the same motor neurons that would be triggered like the same response in your brain.
Yes.
As if you were actually doing it. But I'm curious in terms of sort of like accelerated learning, whether that would actually make you progress faster and towards a high level of proficiency in that skill.
There is quite a bit of research that says that imaginary types of practice does work, and it works well, with a catch. Validate those motor movements, and you're doing that in practice, and then you're reinforcing that with imagined practice. Awesome.
Got it.
But what I found is a lot of people get caught up in the process of just doing the physical practice first.
So we got the 3 of the 5 steps now. So let's kind of like close the loop here. So step number 4.
Okay. Step number 4 is removing barriers to practice. So things that are preventing you from actually sitting down and doing the work.
Okay.
Sometimes those things are environmental distractions, like turning off the TV or blocking the internet or closing the door. All of the things that you can do to make sure in those early hours of practice, which are frustrating, you don't get so frustrated that it's easy to stop focusing on whatever it is that you're doing and start paying attention to something else. Likewise, anything that you can do to make sure it takes as little energy as possible to start practicing is super helpful at that point. So, instead of keeping your guitar in the case in the back of the closet on the other side of your house, right? Take the guitar out of the case, get a stand, put it right next to your couch, and that just anything that you can do to make it easier on yourself to get those early hours of practice, the better.
Yeah, I mean, my guitar is actually hanging out on a rack because of that. It's like almost because I just forget it's even there.
Totally.
Like the visual cue actually makes a really big difference for me. So number 4 is now. I'm curious also. I mean, it sounds like there's a bit of crossover between that and sort of like B.J. Fogg's work on really kind of
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of the same. This is where the behavioral psychology elements of this come in.
Right.
It's how can you make it easier to do the thing that you want to be doing instead of getting distracted by some shiny object and going and doing something else. So instead of relying on exerting a lot of willpower to force yourself to do this thing that you've decided you want to do, you spend a little bit of willpower, a little bit of time and energy altering the structure of the environment around you.
Right.
And just make it easy as possible to do the thing that you want to do.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, last item, number 5.
One. Pre-commit to practicing at least 20 hours. And this is the big one. So all the things that we've talked about so far is getting set up to sit down and do the work of actually practicing. The pre-commitment and the idea of practicing at least 20 hours, there's a lot of behavioral psychology behind that. The 2 big things is, first, it's a really important check on your reasons for learning this thing in the first place.
So it's kind of like, if I'm not willing to commit to 20 hours, I can't be all that serious about it.
Yeah, it's like, is it worthwhile for me to rearrange my schedule and stop doing other things? And, is this something that I'm expecting to get enough benefit from to make the effort worth it?
Yeah.
If it's not, don't do it.
Right.
Life is short, It's like, go do something else that you will get more benefit out of or you are more excited about. So if you're willing to set aside at least 20 hours, What the pre-commitment does is make sure that you practice long enough to push through that early frustration and actually start seeing results. And I think a lot of us really seriously overestimate just how long it takes to become good at something. So you can become really, really good at something, surprisingly good at something, in as little as 20 hours. So if you practice that long, you're going to be way better at the end of that than you were at the beginning.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people also figure, well, you know, like 20 hours, you know, I've done that with a million different things, and I really wasn't very good. But probably when they actually look back and say, well, no, like I missed 3 days here, and like that one day where I, you know, said I was practicing for an hour, I was really practicing for 10 minutes. So when you really add up all the time, I'm guessing there's a little bit of self-delusion that happens.
There's actually quite a bit of research behind this. Our minds are not built to accurately estimate time. And in the early parts of learning something new, it's like, you know, it's terrible. It's like, oh man, I've been at this hours, and you look at the clock and you've been at it 10 minutes.
Right.
And so a lot of the, you know, both pre-committing to a certain amount of practicing. So 20 hours roughly is about 40 minutes a day per month, give or take.
So you kind of think in your mind 40 minutes a day per month.
So a couple of, and I usually break my practice sessions into about 20 minutes apiece, right? So 2 20-minute practice sessions every day for about a month can get you there. And so, you know, if you're able and willing to do that, pre-committing the time, make sure that you practice long enough to see that really good result. But it's also, you know, psychologically it doesn't feel like that big of a hurdle to say, okay, this is important to me.
Right.
I can set aside at least that amount of time, right? So it's just enough that you're going to see dramatic results, but not so much that it prevents you from making the pre-commitment in the first place.
I love that. So let's recap the 5 steps.
Okay. So the 5 steps in order. Step 1, decide what you want. What's your target performance level? Step 2 is deconstruct the skill. Separate it into smaller sub-skills, practice the most important ones first. Number 3 is research the skill just enough to do the deconstruction and choose the most important sub-skills, but not so much that it becomes a barrier to practice in itself. Number 4 is eliminate barriers to practice. Make it easy to do what you want to do. And number 5 is pre-commit to practicing whatever it is that you want to be able to do for at least 20 hours.
Love it. All right, so my mind is spinning because I'm thinking to myself, okay, what am I going to do?
I was going to ask, what's in the back of your mind? What have you always wanted to learn how to do?
It's interesting. I mean, languages, because I don't speak another language. I took Latin for 6 years, which means I speak nothing but English. It's interesting. Like, I want to do a whole bunch of different things, but number 5 is making me say, I need to really think about this.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, like, say, okay, people, I'm going to commit to this publicly.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, an hour after we film this, I'm like, I'm not really, like, willing to put in my 20 hours for that breakdown that you have. And this is all, I mean, obviously detailed and, you know, a whole bunch more extensively in the first 20 hours. But thanks for stopping by and sharing this with me, because like I said, one of the consistent questions that we keep getting from people is, you know, I know that for me to get to a place where I feel like, you know, like I'm living well in the world, I'm doing these things, career, personal, whatever it is, there's a body of knowledge that I need to know and get decent at. But I don't know how to do it, and I think it's going to take forever. So I think this is a really great formula to help people get there.
Thanks. And, you know, I think the really good news is that the outcome of this research is the barrier to sitting down and learning something new is not intellectual. We're all smart enough to sit down and figure it out and practice in a smart way. The barrier is emotional. And so, you know, a lot of these things are just working with ourselves in a smart way to decide we're interested in doing something, figure out how to do it, and actually sit down and practice so we can do a bunch of cool stuff.
Love it.
That's fun.
Awesome.
All right.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My guest today has been
Malcolm Gladwell is here. He is a staff writer for the New Yorker magazine. His first 2 books, The Tipping Point and Blink, each sold well over 2 million copies in the United States. His unique take on the world ultimately has even spawned its own term, Gladwellian. His new book is called Outliers, The Story of Success. I am very pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, tell me, I said to you as you sat down, I am fascinated by performance and success in terms of the essence of it. And how do you get there? Not that there's a magic formula, but what can we understand about it?
Yeah. No, it is. It's this sort of perennially interesting question, and there are so many different answers depending on who you ask and when you ask them, and that's why we keep returning to it. If it was some little simple algorithm we could apply, it wouldn't capture our imagination in the same way.
It is said that part of the reason for this book, and there is some personal biography here, you talk about your grandmother, was that you were in search of explaining your own success, this phenomenal success you've had.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was a conscious attempt. I would never do something sort of explicitly autobiographically, consciously, but I suppose on some level, I mean, that question began to occur to me because my own success doesn't seem to me to be entirely rational, or it certainly wasn't anything I would have expected.
And you couldn't necessarily look at particular biographical points and say, aha, this guy's going to be either president or write bestsellers.
Yeah, it seems that I got really lucky. I mean, luck is a huge theme in this book, and it's funny. And we're not very good with luck. We either we tend to sort of discount it. We'd always rather give a kind of considered explanation for something than just to say it's happenstance. But you know what? A lot of the time it really is. And I try, and in the book I try and sort of zero in on what is exactly the nature of the lucky break that characterizes so much of truly outstanding success.
Okay, let's take an easy example that you use. Bill Gates.
Yeah, so Bill Gates is lucky in many ways.
Yeah, very broad.
He starts two ways in particular. One is that when he walks into 8th grade at Lakeside Academy in Seattle in 1968, there is a computer terminal sitting there with a link into a mainframe in downtown Seattle. No one had access to a computer terminal in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade or even college in 1968.
Anywhere else in the world.
No, and he himself told me, he's like, if there were 50 people in my position in 1968, I'd be stunned. And he basically spends his entire teenage years programming, right? Because of this gift. And he told me one point, Paul Allen, his great high school buddy, with whom he co-founds Microsoft, discovers there's a mainframe down at University of Washington that's free. It's not being used between 2 and 6 in the morning. So he goes to bed at 10 o'clock, sets the alarm clock, climbs out the window, whatever, at 1:30 in the morning, walks 2 miles to the University of Washington, and programs from 2 till 6. Now I love this way because it's the two parts of his success are right there. One is the extraordinary desire and obsessiveness and determination and love of computing, but the other is the fact that he's a guy who lives 2 miles from people may have the first thing. Almost no one has the second thing, right? I could have walked for a month and not come onto a plane.
But this is central to what you were saying here, and so let's explore it in more. The Beatles.
Yeah. Same thing. So Beatles, I'm really interested in one of the other themes I come back to in the book is this notion of how long does it take to be good at something?
Exactly.
And psychologists who have looked at this in the expertise literature have said, you know what, if you look at a whole range of cognitively complex activities, time and time again we see that expertise is reached only after a minimum of 10,000 hours of practice. And that roughly translates to 10 years of doing something. And I do this actually now with anyone who's good at something. I could do it with you right now. I just ask people, all right, in your career, what was the point that you started to feel comfortable in your role? And it's always 10 years. It's always 10 years. And I'm sure if we did the math with you right now, it would come out to...
No, you're right.
And so this magic number of 10,000 hours, what that says is the first in a cohort to reach 10,000 hours has a huge advantage. So Gates having that computer down the street, or that computer in 8th grade, gives him his 10,000 hours before anyone else who was that age. The Beatles, before they come to America, get invited to go to Hamburg. They're still teenagers, and they become a house band in a strip club, and they play 8-hour sets 7 days a week for months at a time. They get their 10,000 hours in before the British invasion, right? That's why they're good. That's not the only reason, but absent that grad school in rock and roll, they're not the band that we think they are, and they don't make that splash when they come to America.
And I assume that you could look at people who have been great athletes where there's a demand for performance at a young age, and discover that they started practicing under very good circumstances very early. Tiger Woods would be Exhibit 1.
Would be Exhibit 1. And the key, what you just said is key. When you said under very good circumstances, this is not just Michael Jordan going out and shooting baskets. The term that expertise researchers use is deliberate practice. That is to say, focused, intensive practice with an eye to zeroing in on your failures and addressing them, your weaknesses. And I'm sure, I would love to have a camera on Michael Jordan as a 16-year-old as he plays basketball and seeing, because I am convinced that that's what sets him apart, that when he practiced in a different way, and that he was constantly thinking about what am I not doing well and why am I not doing it well and what can I do to perfect it.
Because, he didn't make his team as a 14-year-old or something. The junior high team didn't make it and then became a star and got a scholarship to North Carolina.
Well, it's interesting, just to talk about Michael Jordan for a second. Unlike a lot of other basketball players, his game changes dramatically over the course of his professional career. And he's not a great outside shooter when he starts and has a, devastating jump shot by the time he retires. So he never stopped this kind of constant process.
He added to his arsenal, and once he became a pro, even. There have been lots of examples of that. People that had a certain kind of college career, and then they found out once they got to be a pro that they needed to add to it. But what do we read into this? We read in this access to deliberate practice over 10,000 times.
Yes.
May give you the opportunity for success. The opportunity.
Yeah. Yes. And that's a big thing, because, ultimately this book ends up with a series of kind of policy prescriptions, because it's supposed to be a way of thinking about this question of how do we help people achieve their potential, right? And there's all kinds of ways to do that. And the very simple answer from the book is you give them opportunities to work harder. And so I end the book, for example, with a chapter about the KIPP academies in this new breed of charter schools, which is really based on this idea. There's nothing fancy about what they do. What they do is extend the school day, summer, have school start at 7 and go until 6 at night, and have them come in on Saturday. And for kids who want to work harder, they will give you that opportunity. And the insight is...
what separates the kids who want to work hard from those that don't?
I have one of the chapters in the book is about Jewish lawyers.
Yes, exactly. It's wonderful.
And it's all about this group of men who rise from the Bronx and Brooklyn, children of immigrants from Europe, grew up, parents in the garment industry, grew up in the tenements.
Right, in the 1930s.
In the 30s and 40s, and end up at the top of the legal profession in New York. This is what this is hunger, right? So, and one of the central ideas in that chapter is this notion that it was because they were discriminated against as Jews coming out of law school, and as a result, forbidden to work at the big downtown law firms, that they went out on their own and took up this unfashionable area of corporate law called takeovers, and practiced it in isolation and obscurity for 20 years, and then
all of a sudden it became a big deal.
Big deal, and they were at the top of the game.
And they were prepared.
But
preparation meets opportunity.
That's slight, though, at the beginning. The big fancy waspy law firm telling these kids named, Greenberg or Flom or what have you, that you can't work here.
And we don't care what you grades were at Harvard.
And we don't care what or in their case, NYU.
Yeah, right.
We don't care. That, that slight is of incalculable importance. I mean, you just said that Jordan doesn't make his team when he was 14. When he was 14, right? Again, that slight is that, I think that is the kind of added psychological...
But do you have that gene in you?
Did I have it? I don't think I've ever had a slight, but I'm not...
Not a slight. I don't think it has to be born of a slight.
No,
I think it can come from... And that's the intriguing question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just saw Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone has got a list of the 25 greatest singers.
Okay.
And include... talent had something to do with this.
Yes.
So where do we put that?
Obviously it's there. What's fascinating to me is in the psychological literature on expertise, there are a whole group of psychologists for whom I have an infinite amount of respect, who will stand up and with a straight face say that talent doesn't exist, that it's all application and effort. Now, I don't know if I'm willing to go that far, but what that tells me is, look, we think it's this much, and it's not. It's it's this much. It's some tiny fraction of what we think it is.
I believe have in the history of doing this more than 30 years. 30 years, this show, 18 years. I have never had somebody say to me, the reason I'm so good at what I do is because I'm smarter than everybody else.
Yeah.
It is all because I wanted it more, I worked harder, I focused more, I sacrificed more, and more importantly, I had a deep passion for the thing.
Yeah.
Whether it was swinging a golf ball, hitting a basketball, doing scientific research, being a diplomat.
Yeah.
And they never lose it. Yeah. And it is their best friend, their very best friend. Everything else takes, and then you get into work balance and all that stuff. Am I right?
Yeah. No, when I think about the story of the Beatles, what's fascinating about them, of course, is that they went to Hamburg in the 50s and were a house band for a strip club. Do you have any idea how miserable that must have been? 8-hour sets. You must really, truly love rock and roll if you're willing to play as a house band in a Hamburgian strip club. I mean, it's like the nastiest situation.
You're willing to take the sacrifices necessary to get there.
Yeah.
So what do we know about Barack Obama? I mean, here's a man who's had phenomenal success, of power in the world.
Yeah. Well, there's two parts of Barack Obama that fascinate me. The second half of my book is all about culture, but the role that culture plays in success, and how different cultures have very, very different strengths in different. And so I spend a lot of time contrasting Asian and Western cultures, for example, and talking about how Asian kids are better at mathematics for cultural reasons. That there's something about their culture that's beautifully suited to.
Okay, well, this is intriguing. So tell us what it has to do with.
Well, I think it has to do. So we make this observation that there's a huge difference in the performance of Asian kids and Western kids on math tests, right? And we know it's not. We've refuted the genetic argument. They're not genetically better at it. And we also know that from a series of psychological tests that they work harder, and that's the key. They're just simply willing to persevere more. The application of effort is greater. So why? And I have this whole chapter, which is, I think it has to do with patterns of agricultural practice going back hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Having to do with rice.
Rice. My father's European peasant ancestors, who were, in the wheat fields of northern England, probably worked 1,000 hours a year and had lots of holidays and were drunk most of the winter and sleeping and worked till noon every day, right? Their Chinese counterparts in that same period were working 3,000 hours a year, weren't drinking off the afternoons, and weren't sleeping through the winter. They were putting in a second crop of rice. Rice cultures are renowned for the fact that rice is infinitely more labor-intensive than traditional Western agriculture. And I think that if a culture engages in that kind of intensive work for 1,500 years, it doesn't go away. And so you take that child who is the product of that kind of culture.
It makes you good at math.
You sit that child down in front of a calculus problem, and they're going to approach it differently. And some people laugh when I give this theory, but here's the thing: no one has a better theory, right? We don't have any other explanation.
I know.
And the difference between Asian and Western performance is not this much; it's this much. It's enormous, right?
I mean, that's always a good question and a good argument. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. What's the better idea? And nobody says.
Yeah, someone's got to give you a better idea.
Okay.
All right. Today, we've been here for what? A little bit over 2 minutes over 62 minutes. All right. Short one today, because I'm doing homework. Based on the audio, the last two audios you've heard. Today's title is 30 to 180 minutes to hands. What does that mean? I ran across a couple of videos this morning, one new and one that I forgot I saw months ago, but it was right on time. And that's dealing with building tiny houses, the time that it takes. So one video was dealing with how to build a tiny house in 3 hours. 3 hours. So I've been, that's why I play so much audio today, because I've been getting into that stuff. So 3 hours, and then the video that I saw months ago, but I forgot I saw it, was well, it's titled How to Build they did it in somebody's backyard. And they put it together. The distinction between the word build and the word assembled. All right. So in the case of the 28, the house in the backyard, they had bought a tiny house kit. You know, Sears used to sell houses in kits. They bought a kit, and then they assembled, and the kit comes with parts. Just like if you go to IKEA or something like that, IKEA, you know, you can buy furniture, a table, a computer desk, whatever, a bed. They come in kits, and then you assemble, you know, you assemble the parts into a bed or desk or chair, table, whatever you want. You purchase. That's through IKEA. Now, so with the one that was assembled in 28 minutes, a tiny house in somebody's backyard, it was assembled in 28 hours. In other words, it came with a kit. Now, build is you're making the parts. In other words, you're making the walls, because you know you have to assemble the parts, or get the parts rather, to make the wall, make the roof, you know, install the bathroom, you know, the closets, that type of stuff. You know, you might use a hammer, nail, saw, screw gun, what have you, but you make the parts of the house, and then you can assemble it. All right. So that's what we'll be doing with our live demonstrations on Tuesday. Well, not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday and Tuesdays from now on out. We'll be doing in a demonstration. There'll be a part 1 and a part 2 demonstration. That's all I'll say for now. Okay. Part 1 demonstration on a Tuesday, and then a part 2 demonstration, which we complete the whole thing on a Saturday morning. So Tuesday evenings, not this coming Tuesday, we'll let you know next week. Tuesday evening, Tuesday like from 6 to 7 p.m., we'll do a part 1 demonstration of our, because we have 2 type of models, a 30-minute house and a 180-minute house. 180 minutes is 3 hours. And I'm going with the 180 over 3 hours because simply we have the stop clock on that one. On both of them, actually. So we'll give you the dates on those. And like I said, I'm studying these 2 things right now, so that's how the Bonus of Monday is going to be.
Unmuted.
Going on. Before we log off for the day, Robin, any news? If Robin's there. Okay, maybe she's at the other line. Let me close that mic out.
Muted.
Okay, let's see.
Hello?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Hold on just 1 second. So I do have news.
Okay.
So when we're on the radio call, the radio show,
All right, okay.
there is a number that we're going to give to people to call in and join us. Our own direct number, and it's a Florida number, 813-646-9809. So I found out that it will ring, and I'll see it ring, and while we're on the call, while we're on the radio show, I can accept their call and bring them right into the show with us. And when we're not live and manning the phone, there's a voicemail that they can leave their names and numbers on. So that's the number that we'll give out on the radio show. and as well as for them to call back and contact instead of the 45 number. Okay?
I have a question. Can that be switched to 904 area code?
We might can, but I mean, I would have to go through and put in a request for them to change it. I don't know that I can get a 904. It's a Florida area code.
Right, now the reason why, that's Tampa. And the majority of people that will be calling on Monday, like the ones that we got already, every one of them 904.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's no long distance anymore. And I mean, this is our conference line. This is the number that's already out there for our network. And so I would, just for this one faction, I would have to go through some gyrations and change it across my whole platform. You understand?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, it's a 813. It's a Florida number. There's no long distance charges anymore. You understand? And so
I understand that part. Yeah.
It should suffice. So,
okay. All right. Well, we'll run it through.
Yeah, and also, that station is not going to be the only market that we're in. You understand? And so we're not going to be going and getting a phone number in every area code that we're dealing in. That's not costly, feasible.
All right. But for now, the only boots on the ground market is Jacksonville.
I understand that. And the only boots on the ground network that we develop will not only be in Jacksonville. It will be in other places. So we're not going to get a phone number for every location that we're not. No, we're not going to do that. Does that make sense to you?
Okay.
It's centralized.
Yeah, we're keeping it simple. Yeah, we're keeping it simple.
Yes, sir. On our already, we're going to use what we have. I've already brought this to the table that suffices all of our needs. People can call the number and I can bring them right into the show. And when we're not live and not answering the phone, there's a voicemail. I mean, that's better than the number that they're giving in. Because they're not going to take, I guarantee you, anyone that calls the radio station number after we're not on the air, and they ask any questions and try to leave their phone numbers for us, they're not relaying that information.
No, more than likely not.
No, they're going to say, oh, sorry, when are they on? You have to call back and can contact them then. That's when. So, okay, so this number, it has a voicemail. We have the ability to bring them in live. And I've tested it out. If someone called the number right now, 813-646-9809, I would answer it and bring them right into this show. So we can it's portable. We can take this wherever we go. Does that make sense to you? Yep, I'll answer and directly into the call. And then when we're not on a live call, they get a voicemail and they can leave a message. The custom greeting says abiding faith or says welcome to thank you for calling I Am Streaming Network and Abiding Faith Housing Ministry. Please leave your message, name and number. Okay? I got you.
Got it. All right.
And it only took 5 minutes to set all that up.
Good. All right, and we're on YouTube Live as well. So, on that note, I'm going to, because I'm doing homework here based on these videos. On that note, that's it for me for today. On that note, everyone have it's Friday already, man. This week went by quick.
Yeah, it's Friday. The 9th month this year is going like fast. So everybody have a great weekend. Study to show
All right.
myself.